So today I want to talk about Line 3 and Enbridge's propaganda. Last week, I released a video talking about how Enbridge was funding the police with riot gear, and how the police were brutalizing and torturing protesters and water protectors by exploiting pressure points in what is generally known as pain compliance. Well, now we've reached a point where Line 3 replacement project has been completed, and tar sand oil is scheduled to start moving as of October 1st. As a reminder, the amount of oil they will move will be the carbon equivalent of 50 coal-fired power plants, and will have devastating effects on the climate and the local environment. In response to this, Enbridge has put out its own press release, propagandizing the project and erasing all of its wrongdoing in this document. So I'd like to spend some time going over that piece of propaganda and break it down for what it truly is. That said, I'm in no way going to be able to cover this from every single angle and to the fullest extent that it could possibly be covered, and break down just how propagandizing this information is. So with that said, I am going to do my best in that regard, and any additional information is welcome to be added in the comments. And with that said, let's take a look at this document that's put out by Enbridge. We have here on September 29th, 2021, Line 3 replacement project substantially completed and set to be fully operational. Enbridge announced today that the achievement of a major milestone with the substantial completion of Line 3 replacement project and the establishment of an in-service date of October 1st. The step marks the full replacement of the entire 1,765 kilometer, 1,097 mile long pipeline from Edmonton, Alberta, Canada, to Superior, Wisconsin, United States. With new state-of-the-art thicker wall pipes, its completion ensures a safe, reliable supply of North American crude oil to U.S. refineries, helping fuel the quality of life for millions of people. So this needs to be broken down right from the beginning. Thicker walled pipes, what does that even mean? The fact of the matter is, all pipes burst, all companies have spills. They will spill at some point. There's never been a company that has not spilled. And in a lot of the cases, from what I've heard on the ground of what's happening there, the thicker walled pipes are just going around the old pipes. They're not really replacing a lot of it, except where they've had to track on new land. They've had to just basically wrap the old pipes around it. That's how they've been dealing with a lot of it. And in addition to that, when they talk about fueling the quality of life for millions of people, this is going to have the exact opposite effect of that. It's going to devastate huge portions of the environment. It's going to destroy local areas, the wildlife there, the waterways there. Eventually, this is going to have catastrophic effects both on the local environment and the climate as a whole. Again, 50 coal-fired power plants in terms of their carbon output. That is going to have a devastating effect on the climate. But what they're more interested in here, more than anything else, is the quality of life of the people who are making money off of this. And I don't know where they're getting their information that millions of people's quality of life is going to go up, because a lot of the refineries that they're sending it to, from what I've heard, are supposed to be exporting a lot of that oil. So how is that going to benefit anybody but their own financial gains and capital? And again, is this going to benefit the planet? No, it's going to have a devastating impact on millions of people. And we know this also because of the history of this company. Because we look back at their history when it comes to pipelines. Maybe you want to give them the benefit of the doubt. I don't think you should. On March 3rd in 1991, the Line 3 pipeline ruptured near Grand Rapids, Minnesota, spilling over 1.7 million gallons of oil, much of which flowed into the Prairie River. After a negligently delayed response by the company, the Prairie is a tributary of the Mississippi, so were it not for 18 inches of ice on top of the river, the spill could have poisoned the drinking water of millions downstream, and would likely be remembered very differently. There could have been millions of people poisoned. So you want to talk about millions of people gaining and benefiting. If that pipeline ruptures under the Mississippi right now, you will see millions of people likely die, because there won't be as much ice, because as the next sentence shows, thankfully this was back in the day when our territories were still frozen and snow covered in March, before climate change had fully sunk its teeth. And that's the thing. The defrosting is happening much earlier as we've had climate change occurring. As temperatures have risen, March has been less of a cold month, and so a lot of these snow-covered Marches are now snow-covered Februaries. And we know that when the pipes contract and expand due to changing temperatures, that's often when we see these pipes burst the most. It happens with water mains and it happens with oil pipes. And the thing is because of the extreme shift in temperature that will often happen, where you'll see a 10 to 20 degree shift pretty much overnight between seasons now, you can get a situation where the pipe literally expands or contracts in the wrong way from these temperature shifts, and you're going to get it bursting. And if it bursts under the Mississippi River this time, there probably won't be ice to save people. And before anybody tries to say that was a different company with being Lakehead Pipeline, they bought Lakehead. It's part of the same company now. It's part of Enbridge's mainline corridor. So the same Line 3 that, again, has just been built around is the same pipe that we're talking about. This isn't going to be safer, and it's not going to benefit millions. As we move forward in the article, after more than 8 years of many people working together, extensive community engagement, and thorough environmental, regulatory, and legal review, we are pleased that Line 3 is complete and will soon deliver the low-cost and reliable energy that people depend on every day. From day one, this project has been about modernizing our system and improving safety and reliability for the benefit of communities, the environment, and our customers, says Al Monaco, the Enbridge president and chief executive officer. Now, these are just the type of platitudes I expect from a company like this, where they're just putting it out there. But if you want to talk about whether or not they have actually done all of this work, there are a lot of questions about the environmental review, which we'll get into in later paragraphs when we cover those. But when it comes to the whole modernizing and improving safety, we have to look at the record of this company since that spill in 1991. In 2002, they spilt more than 250,000 gallons into a wetland. Enbridge over the recent years has only spilled twice. Only spilled twice over the past 5 years. This is an article put out in 2018. So between 2013 and 18, they had spilled twice, causing over 210 gallons to spill, which, while it does not sound significant, can have effects on wildlife and the people in the area. And furthermore, in 2010, you cannot erase this history. In Marshall, Michigan, Line 6B had a massive rupture that ended up causing more than 1 million gallons to spill into the Kalamazoo River, including thick, sticky tar-like bitumen from Canada's oil sands region, and unlike lighter conventional oil, can sink to the bottom of lakes and rivers. That again is the same oil they are pumping through Line 3 right now. So their history, even within the past 10 years, is not good, so I don't know why we should expect anything different moving forward. As we move forward in this article, Line 3 was developed and executed with the most state-of-the-art approach to design, construction, and environmental management. Monaco added, "We're also very proud of the relationship of trust we built with communities along the right-of-way in both Canada and the United States. Our goal is to continuously live up to the trust that all of our stakeholders have placed in us." Now, again, this is the type of platitudes I'd expect from a company like Enbridge. However, it's worth noting when we talk about stakeholders, that includes a large swathe of people. There are external stakeholders, such as the people in the local communities, people who are working on the project temporarily, the communities that it's going through, and then there's the stakeholders such as the shareholders, the CEO, the members of the company who will gain and benefit from all of this. And when they talk about stakeholders here, assume they're talking about company internal ones and not the external ones. And the reason we know that is because even this past year, they have ignored all of the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency's claims and all of the things that water protectors have said to try to defend and protect the land. Between June 8th and August 5th, there were 28 releases at 12 river crossing locations of drilling fluid. In one of those cases on July 6th, about 80 gallons of drilling fluid spilled into the Willow River in Aitkin County. The MPCA says there were 13 spills into wetlands, 14 accidental releases into upland areas, although one of those flowed into a wetland. Drilling fluid is used as a lubricant drilling process, and it's mostly made of bentonite clay. Although it's not probably toxic to humans, it can have a huge impact on aquatic life. And they've been drilling into the mud and have been doing this without proper supervision. The construction does not authorize the release of drilling fluid to a wetland or river, but again, they've been doing that. And even though it was cleaned up and for the most part, this is what they've been doing when nobody's looking. And it has been the water protectors who've had to point this out consistently and make it known so that it could actually be dealt with. because the company's internal people are not covering it. Now, moving forward, the new 542-kilometer, 337 Minnesota segment of Line 3, which follows other segments already placed into service in Canada, North Dakota, and Wisconsin, restores the pipeline to the capacity of 760,000 barrels a day to meet the energy needs of refineries in the Midwest. Again, phrasing it that way, that it's the refineries that are going to gain from it, does not tell me that it's going to be people in the US who are largely going to use it. A lot of those refineries are probably going to outsource a lot of that oil. Now, there's an issue regardless that burning that oil will still have drastic effects, but they can't even make the claim that it's going to help the people in the region, because it's probably not. It's only going to help the people who run and own those factories and refineries. Now they try to pull the whole labor argument. Well, many labor groups, including the International Union of Operating Engineers, Laborers International Union of North America, United Association of Plumbers and Pipe Fitters, and the International Brotherhood of Teamsters, all and communities along the right-of-way, made the successful completion of the project possible. So this is where they tried to do the thank you to, oh, we used union labor, we used local contractors, we tried to keep everything local and, give union jobs, and this is the whole jobs argument. But the fact of the matter is none of the jobs are permanent. They are temporary positions. And when we look more into this, we find that Enbridge estimates for the number of jobs Line 3 would bring to Minnesota have ranged somewhere between 2,000 and 2,500 in the original filings in 2014 to as much as 4,500 now. In one cost-benefit analysis paid for by the company jumped to astonishing levels of 23,000 jobs. But that study was mostly discredited and quickly discredited. The jobs and contractors will be gone once the pipe is in the ground. That's the thing with all of this. They're not creating union jobs. They're not creating these things. Yes, they are hiring union workers. And I honestly question whether or not these union workers should be taking these jobs, because it's going to affect their communities. The local people there, though, are often in desperate places where there are a lack of jobs, where there's a lack of money, there's a lack of available funds. So they take these jobs because that's what they need to do. And I don't blame the workers for this. I don't blame them for having to take methods to try to survive under capitalism. What I do blame is a large corporation and company coming in and doing this and supporting this and doing what they do with the state legislature by buying police officers, by paying off politicians and paying off all sorts of other people in order to get this all laid out. And the fact of the matter is, from what we're seeing in sworn testimony at an evidence hearing, Line 3 project director Paul Eberth admitted that the actual number of permanent jobs created would be closer to 22. That's right, 22 or fewer according to other accounts. And that's what we're talking about here when we're talking about them hiring union workers and local workers. So yeah, they're helping people in the sense that they're providing necessary funds and jobs for a temporary sense, but they're going to have permanent problems because of this. As we move forward in this article with the last three paragraphs, in Minnesota, the Line 3 replacement was the most studied pipeline in the project most studied pipeline project in state history, with input gathered from 71 public comment regulatory meetings and over 3,500 community engagement meetings. Exhaustive scientific review exceeding legal and regulatory requirements resulted in support and project approvals from federal, state, and local agencies and Native American tribes. Okay, they're not specifying first and foremost which Native American groups have been, in fact, supporting this. That is a problem, because they're trying to make it sound like everybody's been on board with this, and no, there's been a large amount of Native American groups that have been absolutely against this. That's first and foremost when I look at that paragraph. Second of all, when we look at the studies on this, we have to take into account that when we look at another situation where they had a drilling fluid spill rather, those who watched Line 3 closely were not surprised by the accident, nor the sluggish response. The project traverses a complex landscape. There's little data on the hydrology and geology of the area, which is rich in wetlands, sensitive ecosystems, and rapidly changing soil conditions. In a contested case hearing on Line 3's water permits, geologist Laura Triplett testified that it was irresponsible to build a pipeline through the area without spending at least 1 year of studying these intricate systems. So no, this isn't some greatly researched project. This isn't something that is just, magically being made with the state-of-the-art technology, and everything has been tested and everything's been approved, if the state requirements that they passed are not enough to talk about even having a year of studying of an intricate system, then it's the state requirements that are lacking. And, as we know moving forward here, this raises an important question. Who's making the on-the-ground decisions crucial to avoiding accidents? The permits themselves show that our state agencies are generally not on site. Rather, important decision-making is left to Enbridge's own environmental inspectors, along with, quote, independent environmental monitors who report to the state agencies but are paid off and selected by Enbridge, albeit subject to agency approval. And it appears that Enbridge has not always listened to these monitors. This spring, multiple spills were reported to the MPCA where stormwater containments failed. And they failed to release, they declined to release the details on that, citing investigation. But the fact of the matter is they're paying independent monitors and getting to select who gets to be on the board to choose what they're doing. And on top of that, they're using their own environmental inspectors. That doesn't match up with what they're saying here about having exhaustive legal and regulatory requirements fulfilled and having it be the most studied project. Most studied by the people who are in their pocket, maybe, but not the most studied by independent resources that are actually trying to maintain whether or not this is good for the environment or not. We move forward to this paragraph. More than 1,500 Indigenous people worked on replacing Line 3 in the US and Canada. Specifically in Minnesota, where Native Americans made up 7% of Line 3 workforce, over $300 million went to the directly to Native-owned contractors, tribal community investments, and training and hiring Native individuals. In total, the company invested 750 million Canadian dollars with Indigenous communities, individuals, and businesses. So, I don't have the data on that specifically. I can't speak to how much money they spent on Indigenous communities and all that. A lot of their records and money was kind of kept hush-hush and pushed to the side, so I can't really look up that data. But what I can tell you is what it's done to some communities. And we have here an article, Enbridge Line 3 Divides Indigenous Lands and People. This one person here, Jason Goward, got a high-paying job in Enbridge's Line 3 project, one of, I suppose, the 1,500 that they mentioned. I thought if I worked a couple of years at this, I could finally get ahead a little bit, said Goward's 37, a citizen of the Fond du Lac band of the Ojibwe. I didn't think about the impact of the pipeline on our lands and our way of life. One of the Ojibwe leadership clans is named after the Crane, the ones who speak on behalf of the people. The Cranes were frantically fleeing the wetlands at the sound and disturbance of the heavy machinery he operated. Protesters gathered to oppose the pipeline, shouting at Goward, demanding to know why he was destroying his homelands. He recognized friends among the water protectors, as they are known, friends with whom he has worked on past community projects. One was crying, and he thought of his young sons, who might one day want to hunt, gather medicines, and harvest rice as part of their Ojibwe birthright. I kind of had an epiphany, he said. Maybe I'm not on the right side of this. I began to think of the pipeline's impact on our water and wild rice. That rice is part of the reason Ojibwe came to this area so long ago. Abruptly, he walked off the job. I feel so relieved, he told Indian Country Today. I had so much guilt, embarrassment, and shame hurting my ancestral lands. This is one of those workers. This is one of the people that they hired. So it's causing conflicts, not just externally between peoples, but internally within people to figure out whether or not they're doing the right thing. When they're just trying to get ahead, when they're just trying to make a little bit of money to survive off of in these terrible economic conditions that a lot of people are living in. And then they're getting used as a tool by the company to say, look, we had all these Indigenous people supporting our project. Let's ignore all of the people who have been working against it. Let's ignore all the water protectors that we've sent the cops against. Let's ignore all of the different groups that have been critical of us. Let's just promote the few that we've been able to effectively buy out when they've needed money and they've needed to utilize these to survive. So this is what the company is essentially doing, exploiting that in their propaganda piece. And as we move forward in this article, it's a conflict facing growing numbers of Native peoples along Line 3's nearly 400-mile path. As it cuts across the Fond du Lac Reservation, treaty lands of several other bands of Ojibwe, and the headwaters of the Mississippi River in northern Minnesota, the project has brought not just jobs, but controversy and discord to the most intimate spheres of spirituality, family, and community. The friction intensified as Enbridge pumped large sums of money into local communities along the pipeline route through donations, jobs, tax revenues, money for local policing, and local advertisements. In the process, the company won support from some local governments, an agreement from at least one tribe not to oppose the project, and acceptance from untold tribal members. Enbridge leaders know that there's no way to win the hearts and minds of all of the native people, but they don't have to, said Anton Troyer, a professor of Ojibwe language at the State University in Minnesota. If they can win over just enough to clear the hurdles to get to the next easement or next little contract or permit approved, they know they'll be able to get the work done. Again, they can ignore everybody else and just take the few that are, signing the contract here or getting the permit there, and they know that's exactly what they have to do to get this thing built. And on screen, we have a map just going how the pipeline was essentially going through the wild rice lakes and the treaty territory and the reservation lands. So we have all of this shown here in this depiction. If we move forward now to the last paragraph, we come up to what I think starts to get into the area where they really start to propagandize how wonderful they are, and they use Native Americans as a tool to promote their project. Throughout the project, Enbridge has shown continuous respect for tribal sovereignty. In Minnesota, 30 tribes took part in the consultation process with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. The project included a first-of-its-kind tribal cultural resource survey led by the Fond du Lac Band and the Lake Superior Chippewa, which employed tribal cultural experts who walked the full route, identifying and recording significant cultural resources to be avoided. Construction was completed under the supervision of tribal monitors with authority to stop construction to ensure protection of important cultural resources. So they're saying, oh, we did it within the cultural norms, we respected everybody, but the fact of the matter is they did not at all. In fact, we know that Sasha Bolu, of the Red Lake Tribal Cultural Resource Monitor, kept track of the water levels and watched closely for any water contamination as per her legal rights, but was never actually allowed by Enbridge, their contract workers, or law enforcement to enter the construction and drilling areas to effectively observe. Meaning that there was no actual observation done in this particular area, and if you think this is the only one, you're sadly mistaken. Under the National Historic Preservation Act, tribal monitors are supposed to be able to supervise construction for the purposes of protecting archaeological sites. On their website, Enbridge admits that tribal monitors have the authority to stop construction and ensure that important cultural resources are protected. Yet, they were prevented from doing so. And so the fact of the matter is, they can state this and sound all great, but the fact of the matter is, why? Because they know that they can stop the construction, they hire the people, they tell which people are allowed to come in, but then they don't let them in. And because they don't let them in, they can make the claim that, oh, everything was fine, nothing was said about it, we didn't know. But in the meantime, there's actually a sign here that literally says, tribal monitor required on all grounds. And this is the same area where people were not allowed in. When we move forward in this and explore some more about this, about who exactly was approving this project, when it comes to the Fond du Lac peoples, the band there, the Minnesota Public Utilities Commission had actually said in late June they voted to approve the $2.6 billion pipeline, essentially agreeing with Enbridge that the existing aging and corroding line is too much of a safety hazard and that Line 3 is operating at only 51% capacity due to safety reasons. The new pipeline will restore full capacity. So in June, they said that Enbridge's proposed pipeline route was not fully approved except for one small area near McGregor, Minnesota. Now, of course, this made it so that the Fond du Lac had basically two options. They could either run it straight through the reservation or into the treaty lands. That's the decision they were essentially given. You can do one or the other. And as we come to know, some of the people involved were frustrated with both options. As a matter of fact, they were being forced to choose between two evils as both routes passed through their lands, the reservation and the 1854 ceded territories. the RSA 21, while avoiding the reservation, would pass through the 1854 ceded territory, an area that had never had a pipeline before. There's no perfect outcome here. All remaining options threaten the environment for all and the livelihood of indigenous people of Minnesota. This was said by Dupuis, Kevin Dupuis, the person who is the chairman of the Fond du Lac. And here we also have that the willingness to consider the routing for Line 3 through the reservation was just chosen upon. But again, you basically gave people two bad options and two bad choices. That's not a real choice. That's not an actual decision that you're allowing people to make. That is an ultimatum. Pick A or pick B. You get to pick which evil you'd like. That's not advocacy. That's not support. And when we look at other groups like the White Earth Band of the Ojibwe in northwestern Minnesota, they actually sued the state of Minnesota in tribal court over its issuance to Enbridge of a permit to divert the water as part of Line 3 oil pipeline replacement project in the state's north. In Wednesday's complaint, this was as of August 7th of 2021, in Wednesday's complaint, the tribe recognized that wild rice, a sacred subsistence crop, has rights and alleges that a June permit allowing Enbridge to divert nearly 5 billion gallons of water as part of construction work to replace sections of Line 3 that run through the state violates the rights of the crop as well as those of the tribe. Treaties signed with the U.S. government in the 19th century guarantee the tribe's right to gather wild rice on treaty land. The complaint says the plaintiffs say the legal challenge is the first case brought in tribal court to enforce the rights of nature. And honestly, if the U.S. courts can make it so that corporations are counted as people, there's no reason that the tribal courts can't enforce the rights of nature, because somebody has to do it, because nobody else is taking it seriously. We also know that the Red Lake Band of the Chippewa had said in a petition to the courts as well that the Minnesota Court of Appeals got it wrong last month and handed Enbridge a major victory. So there's been tons of groups that have been speaking out against this, and I'm only touching on a few. There have been numerous water protectors from different groups, including the Fond du Lac, that have come out against this particular pipeline. And another case that I want to look at, which I know it is talking about Line 5, but just the type of treatment that Native American populations have gotten by this company. We have here that tribal leaders in Michigan say that they have no plans to begin, quote, peacemaking talks with Enbridge, despite a recent campaign by the company touting its respect and willingness to engage in Anishinaabe reconciliation traditions. At the end of last month, the oil company, which owns the Line 5 pipeline that runs through Michigan, contacted leaders of the 12 federally recognized indigenous tribes in Michigan, asking to take part in traditional peacemaking processes. Tribal governments in Michigan have overwhelmingly opposed the continued operation of the nearly 70-year-old pipeline. But tribal leaders have not agreed in any such talks with the company, and some have also argued that Enbridge's use of their traditions as a public relations ploy amounts to cultural appropriation. They are literally trying to use the idea of Native Americans supporting their project, the traditions of certain Native American groups as public relation ploys, which is a form of cultural appropriation because they are making money off of the fact that they can play with Native American traditions. And all they have to do is appeal to these reconciliation traditions. And this is the kind of processes that we're seeing come out of Enbridge. This is what that propaganda piece really boils down to. And in all of this, we see that Enbridge is just not telling the full story. They've paid for police, they have paid for the inspectors, they've paid off the state, they have ignored enough indigenous people to make the claims that they're making, but this is by no means any sort of consensus that this is a good thing or that this should exist, and that the people in the area want it or that it'll be beneficial for anyone. It's not even going to provide jobs, it's not even going to provide anything good for the environment, and it's not going to provide anything good for the people or the areas where the pipeline is going through. It's going to spill, and many are still going to fight against this. And they're being met with violence by the state and the hired police of Enbridge. The water protectors and the other activists will not be deterred, and they will not stop fighting until this pipeline is stopped. The long-term effects of spills that are all but guaranteed to happen will spill water into water. They will spill onto land. They will poison the wild rice. And all of this will greatly affect the way of life of people on these lands. And that's just locally. That's not even talking about the massive damage far beyond to the rest of the planet as more and more oil production increases the amount of carbon output and becomes another factor in the long-term effects of climate change. So with that said, if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, hit the subscribe button and the bell for notifications. You can follow me on Twitter and check out my Discord in the description down below. My name is Anarchist Terra, and I thank you for watching.